A few years ago, you may remember that there was a concerted effort on the left to cancel Dr. Seuss, of all people, and it went all the way up to the Biden administration. The White House removed all of Dr. Seuss's books from Read Across America Day, which is the annual celebration that takes place on Dr. Seuss's birthday. Officially, Dr. Seuss's crime, which had somehow gone undetected for the better part of a century, was that he didn't include enough so-called people of color in his various children's books. The University of California even conducted an exhaustive investigation into the matter, and in the end, they found that out of the approximately 2,000 human characters in Dr. Seuss books, only 45 were non-white. On top of that, some of these non-white cartoon characters were not drawn to the satisfaction of left-wing activists. And as if that wasn't bad enough, Dr. Seuss wasn't even a real doctor. He was like the Dr. Pepper of children's literature. And therefore, Dr. Seuss was canceled. His name was banned from his own birthday celebration. Now, of course, these justifications were pretexts. Anyone capable of reading at the first grade level could see that. Dr. Seuss wrote allegories about why racism is bad, about as explicitly as he possibly could. We're not talking about subtle messaging here. And that's the real reason why ultimately Dr. Seuss had to be canceled. The belief that racism is morally wrong is incompatible with leftism, which is now premised on attacking and demonizing white people at every opportunity. They just couldn't say that part out loud, so instead they pretended that they were canceling Dr. Seuss for being a racist, when in fact the exact opposite was true. He committed the mortal sin of teaching children that all forms of race hatred, including race hatred against white people, is wrong. And in a lot of ways, we're seeing a similar effort unfold right now in the UK, where William Shakespeare is getting the Dr. Seuss treatment. For all their differences, Dr. Seuss and Shakespeare do have one thing in common, which is that they both pose a clear and intolerable threat to anti-white racial narratives that have become fashionable on the left. Shakespeare, as arguably the greatest and most prolific writer to ever live, is an example of excellence that very few other countries or cultures have ever come close to matching. There is no Shakespeare of Africa or Shakespeare of Pakistan, for example. And if you're trying to make the case that those countries and cultures are far superior to places like America and Europe because they have fewer white people, which is the argument the leftists genuinely try to make, then Shakespeare's status is obviously inconvenient. After all these years, he stands alone, so now they're coming for him too. But as we saw with Dr. Seuss, they're not going to admit that that's why they're doing it. Instead of saying that they want to tear down Shakespeare because he was white, they're saying that Shakespeare needs to be decolonized. This is a word we've talked about before in several different contexts, and every single time it's used, decolonization is always a cover for anti-white hatred and ultimately for racial violence. They claim that it's about removing remnants of colonialism, whatever that means exactly, but really their motives are transparent. Quoting from the Daily Mail, says, quote, William Shakespeare's birthplace will be decolonized over fears that portraying his success as the greatest playwright benefits the ideology of white European supremacy. Shakespeare's Birthplace Trust owns buildings in the playwright's hometown. It wants to create a more inclusive museum experience and announced that it will move away from Western perspectives after concerns were raised that Shakespeare's ideas were used to advance white supremacy's ideas. Close quote. Yes, they're supposedly going to decolonize the place where William Shakespeare was born, and they're going to accomplish that task by installing foreign influences from all over the world into the place where Shakespeare was born. They're going to import Juliet-inspired Bollywood dance workshops, for example, and they're going to host events celebrating Bengali poets. Presumably, they're also going to remove a bunch of Shakespeare-themed objects from the Shakespeare Museum in the place where Shakespeare was born. They're going to replace them with more inclusive artifacts. In other words, they're going to decolonize Shakespeare's birthplace by colonizing it until it's completely and totally unrecognizable. I mean, if the word colonize means anything anymore, which it doesn't, then that's exactly what they're doing to this little town. Nothing says peaceful slumber quite like waking up feeling like you've been in hand-to-hand combat with a pile of discarded metal springs that have personal vendettas against your spine. Luckily, that's where Helix sleep comes in. I never realized how badly I needed a new mattress until I finally got one. My Helix mattress always supports my body the way it should, and I'm sleeping straight through the night for the first time in years. The best part is waking up actually feeling refreshed instead of dragging myself out of bed. What makes Helix different is that they don't just sell you a random mattress. They actually customize and match you with the perfect one for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or somewhere in between, they've got you covered. Helix has a sleep quiz that'll match you with your perfect mattress in under 2 minutes so you can get better sleep and better start to each day. Trust me, when you find the right match, you'll wonder how you ever slept on anything else. Right now is actually the perfect time to upgrade your sleep because Helix is offering an incredible March Madness sale. Go to helixsleep.com/Walsh to get 20% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Walsh for 20% off site-wide. helixsleep.com/Walsh. And things make less sense when you realize that Shakespeare wasn't alive anywhere near the period when Britain became a sprawling worldwide empire. Britain was just beginning to settle North America when he died, which is why saying Shakespeare is a relic of colonialism, it's a bit like saying that Mark Twain is a symbol of the moon landing. I mean, the timing doesn't really work. To find out more, I looked a little deeper into the whole Shakespeare decolonization effort. I dove headfirst into the belly of the beast. And I came to find out that it's been active in this country for a while, too. So here, for example, is a lecture delivered by an English professor from Arizona State University named Ayanna Thompson. Watch as she explains what exactly it means to decolonize Shakespeare.
So in thinking about how you can encourage an oppositional gaze or decolonized thinking in your Shakespeare classroom, I think one of the things that you can start with is by encouraging juxtaposition. So it's not just creating juxtaposition, right? So it's not just that you say we should read August Wilson's King Hedley next to William Shakespeare's King Lear, which, by the way, do go really well together. It's that you also allow your students to bring in things that they want to juxtapose with Shakespeare. Tunderai, I think his last name is pronounced Amunyevu, is a Zimbabwean playwright, and he has also written a play about Shakespeare called The Moors, and it's quite brilliant and interesting. So I just feel like there's so many ways to allow dialogues to exist. Jay-Z, of course, he's got a lot to say about Shakespeare, a lot. And if you explore some of his interviews, Shakespeare keeps coming up, and he keeps asking interviewers who are challenging him about why he thinks he's the best. And he keeps saying, why don't you think I'm Shakespeare? And he said this numerous times. It's really interesting. So, why not allow your students to bring that into the classroom?
Jay-Z and Shakespeare is indeed quite the juxtaposition. This is the cutting edge of academia, apparently. Just think of all the places students could go with it. They could talk about how sorry they are for Macbeth because while they might have 99 problems, a witch ain't one. Or they could ask the age-old question, to be or not to be Big Pimpin'. I mean, the possibilities are just endless, and those are the extent of my Shakespeare Jay-Z crossover puns that I could come up with. By the way, tuition to attend this professor's school runs up to $32,000 for out-of-state students. So if you want your child to be able to experience life-changing lessons like this, you better start saving now. I mean, it's worth every penny. In case you fell asleep during that clip, the professor begins by saying that decolonizing Shakespeare is all about juxtaposition and the oppositional gaze or whatever. It's a fancy way of saying that instead of talking about Shakespeare, you talk about non-white writers and entertainers instead. That's the whole scam. Now, I watched a decent amount of this lecture, for which I deserve hazard pay of some kind. And pretty much the entire thing is her rattling off a bunch of random, mostly no-name, non-white people that she wants to promote. That's what decolonizing means, I guess. It means assigning a ton of literature based on the skin color of the person who wrote it so that you don't have to talk about Shakespeare. Of course, they try to drown this nonsense with so much academic jargon that no sane person can make sense of it or even sit through it. That's because when you strip away the filibustering and the jargon, you're left with anti-white race hatred. This is what decolonization is about. It's what it's always been about. Shakespeare is perhaps the single greatest writer to ever live, and that may make a lot of people angry. It might undermine a lot of racial narratives. But it happens to be true. And no matter how much Jay-Z and Toni Morrison you force students to pay attention to, and no matter what you do to Shakespeare's hometown, it will remain true. And that is why everyone attempting to cancel William Shakespeare and to decolonize his birthplace are today canceled. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.